Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going on a bit of a wild ride. Buckle up, because we're diving headfirst into Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter.
Or, should we say X now?
Right, X.
Yeah.
It's a story that's been all over the news for years, and there's so much to unpack.
There really is. This platform has gone through some serious transformations, and the whole thing feels a bit like a tech thriller, honestly.
It definitely does.
I know.
Speaking of thrillers, our guide for today's journey is Character Limit. It's a fantastic book by New York Times tech reporters Kate Conger and Ryan Mack.
They had a front row seat to the whole saga. And let me tell you, they don't hold back.
I'm ready for all the juicy details. But first, let's rewind back to the beginning. Where did this whole Twitter thing even come from?
Well, back in the mid-2000s, a guy named Jack Dorsey had this idea.
Oh yeah, Jack Dorsey, the enigmatic founder.
Exactly. He envisioned a platform where people could share quick updates, just bursts of information limited to 140 characters. It was kind of a side project at first, but then the 2007 South by Southwest conference happened.
And it just blew up from there.
It totally did. Suddenly, everyone was tweeting. But Twitter was known for something else right from those early days. Its radical commitment to free speech.
They weren't shy about it either.
Not at all. They even called themselves the free speech wing of the Free Speech Party. But as the platform grew, so did the challenges. Harassment, abuse, misinformation, all those really tough issues started to plague Twitter.
And this is where Jack Dorsey's story gets even more interesting, doesn't it? He had stepped away from Twitter to focus on his other company, Square.
Yeah, he was busy building a payment platform, but then he got pulled back into the Twitter chaos. And get this, Dorsey was actually really involved in the Ferguson protests. I mean, he was right there on the ground, live tweeting the events.
Wow, I didn't know that. That adds a whole new dimension to his character, doesn't it?
Definitely. He believed so strongly in free speech, but he was also witnessing firsthand how that very freedom could be misused and cause real harm. It's a dilemma that Twitter has been wrestling with ever since.
So how does Elon Musk, the self-proclaimed techno-king, enter this picture? Because he wasn't always the Twitter overlord, right?
No, not at all. In the beginning, he was just a super enthusiastic Twitter user. I mean, he loved the platform, he'd share his thoughts, promote his companies, engage with everyone.
Oh, I remember those days. Though he did have a knack for getting into trouble with his tweets.
He sure did. And he had whole teams trying to manage his online persona, but he just couldn't resist those impulsive tweets.
Like that whole pedo guy debacle with the British cave diver, Vernon Unsworth.
Oh, yeah. That led to a huge defamation lawsuit.
It seems like a constant battle between his unfiltered thoughts and, well, the consequences of broadcasting those thoughts to millions of people.
Right. And over time, his frustration with Twitter's moderation policies just kept growing. He didn't like how they were handling things, especially during the pandemic and the 2020 election.
Okay, so at what point does this admiration for Twitter turn into, well, a desire to just buy the whole thing?
Well, it all started with a simple investment. In early 2022, Musk quietly started buying up Twitter shares. He ended up becoming the largest shareholder, and his plan was to join the board.
You wanted a seat at the table.
Exactly. He even had this super weird meeting with Parag Agrawal, the new CEO, and Brett Taylor, the chairman of the board.
Wait, what was so weird about it?
It was at an Airbnb with donkeys and tractors.
Donkeys and tractors, seriously.
I'm not making this up. It's like something out of a movie.
It sounds like the writers of Silicon Valley got together with the writers of Succession and just went wild. But the board wasn't exactly thrilled about having Musk join their ranks, were they?
Not really. They were a bit wary, to put it mildly.
What were they so worried about?
Well, everything. They were worried about his influence, his unpredictability, the fact that he might disrupt the whole company culture. They tried to limit his power. They even used something called a poison pill strategy.
A poison pill? What's that?
Yeah, it's like a defense mechanism companies use to avoid hostile takeovers. They basically make their stock less appealing, harder to buy up.
Clever. Did it work?
Not really. Musk was determined he wasn't backing down. He secured billions in funding, and he basically forced Twitter's board into a corner. He even threatened to just go straight to the shareholders and cut the board out entirely.
Wow, talk about a power move. The employees must have been freaking out at this point.
Oh, absolutely. But that's the story for part 2 of our deep dive. Get ready for Musk's grand entrance, the mass layoffs, and all the chaos that comes with his reign.
Last time, we left off with Musk basically holding all the cards. He was ready to take over Twitter, and the employees were probably bracing for impact.
You can say that again. And Musk didn't exactly make a low-key entrance. On October 26, 2022, he walked into Twitter HQ carrying a porcelain sink.
A sink?
Mm.
Really? What was that all about?
Yeah, a real sink. It was a visual pun. Let that sink in.
I guess you could say that's one way to announce your arrival.
It was definitely memorable. And a little bit weird, to be honest. But that wasn't the only thing that shook things up. One of Musk's first moves was to fire a bunch of top executives.
Like a total power move.
Right. The CEO, Parag Agrawal, the CFO, Ned Saul, and Vijay Gadde, who was the head of legal, policy, and trust, they were all out.
Wow. So much for a smooth transition.
It was definitely a my way or the highway kind of situation. Musk had a vision for Twitter, and he was ready to act fast. Cost-cutting was a big priority, and so was tackling the bot problem.
Yeah, he seemed really obsessed with those bots.
It was a major thing for him. He kept saying that Twitter was underestimating how many bots there were, and he even used it as an excuse to almost back out of the deal altogether.
But it seemed like it was more than just about the bots themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like it was part of this bigger plan to change the whole platform.
Absolutely. Musk wanted to reshape Twitter into something that aligned with his own ideas about free speech and how content should be moderated.
Okay, so how did he go about actually making these changes? What were some of the biggest moves he made?
Well, one of the most controversial things he did was relaunch Twitter Blue, but with a twist.
Twitter Blue, that was the subscription service, right?
Yeah, but now anyone could get a blue check mark for $8 a month.
Wait, didn't that used to be only for verified accounts, like celebrities and politicians and stuff?
Exactly. It was supposed to be a way to confirm someone's identity, to make sure they were who they said they were. But now anyone could just buy one.
I remember seeing a ton of fake accounts popping up after that. It was total chaos.
Oh yeah, it was a disaster. Impersonators were everywhere, spreading misinformation, causing all sorts of problems. There was even this fake Eli Lilly account that tweeted that insulin was now free.
I remember that. The company's stock tanked because of it.
It was a huge PR nightmare for Twitter, and a lot of advertisers started pulling out.
It sounds like Musk really underestimated the technical challenges of keeping things under control.
Yeah, he kind of jumped the gun on that one. There weren't enough safeguards in place to actually verify people's identities, so the whole blue checkmark thing became pretty much meaningless.
So, Musk was shaking things up, but maybe not always in the best way. What was it like for the people who actually worked at Twitter? I mean, all these changes, plus the mass layoffs, it couldn't have been easy.
It was a really tough time. There was this huge culture clash. Musk is, well, he's known for being kind of impulsive and demanding, and he doesn't really tolerate people disagreeing with him.
I can imagine that didn't go over so well.
Not really. There's this story in Conger and Mac's book about Musk just completely dismissing an employee who tried to correct him about something during a meeting.
Yikes. That sounds rough.
It was. And on top of that, you had people getting fired for criticizing Musk on Slack, even though it was supposed to be a private channel.
So basically, if you didn't agree with him, you were out.
Pretty much. Musk saw Twitter as an extension of himself, and he expected everyone to be on board with his vision. If you weren't, well, you weren't welcome.
So what happened next? Did Musk actually manage to turn Twitter into the platform he had in mind?
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. Things were definitely about to get even more interesting.
Okay, so we've covered Musk's dramatic takeover, the chaos, the culture clash, all of it. What happened next? Did he actually succeed in transforming Twitter?
Well, the platform definitely went through some major changes. I mean, it's not even Twitter anymore, it's X now. But one thing that really shook things up was the release of the Twitter files.
Right, the Twitter files, that was a whole thing. What was that all about again?
Well, Musk basically decided to just release a bunch of internal Twitter documents to a select group of journalists. You know, people like Matt Taibbi and Bari Weiss.
And they just went to town on Twitter, right? Posting all these long threads.
Exactly. They were highlighting what they saw as evidence of bias and censorship within Twitter, especially related to the 2020 election.
But wasn't there also a lot of criticism? Like people saying Musk was just using these Twitter files to push his own agenda?
Oh yeah, there was definitely pushback. Critics argue that Musk was cherry-picking information, only releasing stuff that fit a certain narrative. And then there was that whole thing with Jim Baker.
Jim Baker, who is that?
He was a lawyer who had worked at the FBI and was involved in the Russia investigation. He was working at Twitter, and Musk fired him very publicly, accusing him of suppressing information.
It seemed like a very deliberate move. And what about content moderation? That was another big area where Musk made changes, right?
Yeah, he really shook things up. The policies were constantly changing. One of the biggest things was the reversal of those bans on a bunch of controversial figures.
Like Donald Trump.
Yeah, Trump, Kanye West, Andrew Tate, they all got unbanned.
That was definitely a controversial decision. What was Musk's reasoning for that?
He said it was all about free speech. He also got rid of the policy against misgendering. He said that was also about free speech, even though a lot of people warned him it would make the platform more hostile, especially for marginalized groups.
So did all this actually turn Twitter into this free speech utopia that Musk was talking about?
It's hard to say. I mean, yeah, he loosened a lot of the restrictions, so you could pretty much say whatever you wanted. But that also led to a big increase in hate speech and harassment and misinformation.
It sounds like a bit of a double-edged sword.
Definitely. And a lot of users ended up leaving Twitter because they felt like it had just become too toxic.
And what about the advertisers? Did they stick around?
Not really. A lot of them pulled their ads because they didn't want to be associated with all the negativity and controversy.
And didn't Musk's own tweets sometimes make things worse?
Oh, absolutely. Like that time he accused the Anti-Defamation League of trying to kill X. That didn't exactly help things.
It seems like he was always walking this tightrope between promoting free speech and trying to keep things at least somewhat under control. And speaking of X, we can't forget about the whole rebranding. Twitter's gone. It's all X now.
Right. And X is more than just a new name. It's supposed to be this whole everything app like WeChat in China. Musk wants it to handle payments, messaging, all sorts of things.
That sounds super ambitious. Is that even realistic?
It's a huge challenge. There are so many technical hurdles, financial hurdles, regulatory hurdles. It's really hard to say if he'll be able to pull it off.
So what can we say about Twitter's, or rather X's, legacy now?
It's definitely become a reflection of Musk himself. You know, his personality, his beliefs, even his quirks. It's a platform that prioritizes his voice above all else.
And what about Jack Dorsey? How does he feel about all this?
You know, it's interesting. He was initially supportive of Musk's takeover, but lately he's been a bit more critical. He's talked about regretting the influence of venture capital on Twitter's development.
It sounds like he's having second thoughts.
Maybe. He's even launched his own rival platform called Bluesky, which is all about decentralization.
So stepping back from all this, what are the big takeaways for our listeners?
This whole story, it's about so much more than just Twitter or Elon Musk. It really highlights all the challenges facing social media as a whole. You know, the whole debate about free speech, content moderation, the power of these tech giants. It forces us to ask some tough questions about who should be in control of these platforms and what their responsibilities should be.
Definitely a lot to think about. What's the one thing you want our listeners to really consider as they navigate this ever-changing digital world?
I think the big question now is, what does the future of social media look like with X replacing Twitter? Is this everything app idea really a good thing? Or are we heading towards a world where a handful of companies control all our online interactions? And most importantly, what role do we as users play in shaping that future?
Those are some great questions. Well, thank you for taking us on this wild ride through Elon Musk's Twitter takeover. It's been an eye-opening journey, and it's a story that's still being written. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.